Big hey now and good morning. Good morning. Another Hexaco day. Another day in Hexaco, I should say. All right. Go ahead and do an update on the HEX bond market, what we're seeing today. Let's share out my screen. We will get started. Hope everybody's doing well out there. I think the very first thing we're going to dig into is taking a look at the old HEX. Where are we at? All right, here we go. All right. Yeah, so welcome back. So this is the HEX Bond Desk. We'll try to talk about everything about HEX and its derivatives, including the Actuator protocol. So HEX continues to recover from its June lows. Remember them? It was so low. But price remains below the 111-day moving average. We did see it pop up above that, but now it's acting as resistance, which is pretty normal. And so we'll just kind of watch and see how this goes. I think for people who already are pretty aware of it, they understand that these levels are mathematical levels, right? 111-day moving average. And so a lot of traders do follow that, and they're looking for that as a signal of strength once we flip above the 111-day moving average. It may not be that they follow exactly the 111-day moving average. They might be using something else, but they all kind of coalesce together, so to speak. So it looks like HEX is consolidating. Meanwhile, the HEX bond market continues to mature. Very, very early and new, even though it's about almost 2 years old. Today, we're going to look at the HTT 3000 as the leading value, HTT 6000 reclaiming the premium lead, and why Quattro 7s and the HTT 8000 illustrate the potential for amplification, how we can amplify using those, and why the expanding monthly HTT ladder may become one of Actuator's biggest achievements. We're going to watch that and see. We can take a look. Today's market's pretty quiet from a pricing perspective. HEX is testing and remains below the 111-day moving average. You can see at a couple days above it. Let's zoom in. Just take a look at that. We came up to it, tested it, broke it, tested it again on the downside, came down below. Now it looks like it's rising back up, potentially to test it. So we will watch that to see what's happening with the old HEX. Yeah. And so the big story with the HEX bond market is that we'll continue to develop the infrastructure. You're seeing users come in and begin to use it. So let's go take a look at our Actuator datas. All right. Just looking at the Actuator dashboard, 7,900 best total return, roughly around 125%, 124% fixed return in terms of HEX, meaning if you were to swap into a HTT 7,900 with HEX, you would realize 124% fixed return, assuming all things being equal between now and day 7,900. The best premium, 6,000 came up and indicates the best premium, thick liquidity overall, medium in terms of the HTTs that are out there, but a pretty good amount of liquidity, good opportunity to, if you have them, to swap into something else you like, or you can just hold them too. I mean, people do different things with the HTTs that they have. But this is an amplification opportunity. I'll show that on the amplification chart a little bit later, albeit is conditional on market conditions. Always do your own research, take a look at that. But swapping into a 6,000 right now, if you're doing it, say 4.5% fixed APR. The best APR is the 3,000 at 17.2%. APR. If we look at the 3,000 on their little doohickey here, we can see it's discounted 21%, over 21% now. The fixed APR is 17% going out in a year and a half. That's a pretty good rate for a year and a half commitment. And when I say commitment, that means these are cheap. So people would swap into HTT 3000s, hold them until redemption, which is in February 2028, and the calculated return is a little bit over 27%. Not bad for a year and a half. I mean, TradFi, if you were able to find regular investments that gave you 27% total return every year and a half, people would be all over it. People would be all over that. That's for sure. All right, let's take a look at the next set here. So we talked about the HTT 3000s that continue to offer strongest value on the curve, right? So we see that. Best premium is at 6,000 as mentioned. The 7,000 remains the best liquidity. Let's go take a look at that. So we're going to switch over to the farms just to look at the liquidity in that from that perspective. And we can see the HTT 7000s are up about $90,000 in fiat value. So that continues to be the strongest LP. And these are the majors. The incentivized LP is going all the way back down to the 3000s, with 3000 coming in about 36K. You can see the farm APRs at this point in the actuator protocol is 30% roughly for HTT 3000. That's where people are pairing up HTT 3000 and HEX, putting it into the PulseX, and then depositing the LP into the farms. HTT 4000 HEX, 47%. HTT 5000 HEX, 47%. 6000's 44%. And 7,000's 36%. Just observationally high level, it appears to us as we're watching the yield curve that people are most interested in the longer HTTs in terms of providing liquidity and farming and all the rest. And that's, I guess that's to be expected, right? This whole delayed gratification, longer pays better. People are interested in these HTT 7000s. However, with the advent of the lower curve on lower yield curve on the short terms, I'm wondering if people will take interest in that, and we'll look at that here in a few minutes. All right, a big insight here. Let's look at the yield curve real quick. All right, so this is the actuator site. I'm looking on their dashboard. I'm going down to where you can create your own HEX yield curve. One of the things I've been observing the last few weeks is that I have these estimates, right? So I have my payout per T-share estimates that I'm using. They're beginning to vacillate and change a little bit, but not on the early dates, on the long dates, which makes sense because they're way out there. And so activities that take place today affect the curve, but it's a pretty marked increase going out to 7,900 and 7,977, which is essentially an 8,000 stake. We're only not too far out from day 8,000 at this point, meaning when you do a Quattro Cinco, it will be a day 8,000 stake on that particular day. So when I load that information in, I can see the 6,000s remain a strong amplification, where amplifying could go as high as 58% versus 49% in terms of ROI. We also saw with that little change, and the reason I brought it up, that little change in the payouts, as well as some demand for the HTT 7777s, that they've popped up as a possible amplification point. And for those of you who listen to me regularly, I'm interested in the 77s, the 7900s, and the 8000s because the big giant OA stakes start to end at the tail end of the curve. And so in my mind, there's greater opportunity long term, maybe, right? If those T-shares aren't recreated, and we know they can't recreate the same number of T-shares, but if they're not recreated, you have a different ratio. Your portion is a lot greater out there. So we do see consistent staking. Actuator might be accounting for quite a bit of the Quattro Cinco staking right now. We'll have to do some analysis on that. But when we go out here to the 777s, you get 97 versus 94, so a slight edge. 97% ROI versus just a simple stake out to 777 of 94%. Day 8,000s, much different, right? They're still a little high priced. And we saw this happen over the last few days. People said, well, why does that price stay high? Why are people interested? So the only way you can get an 8,000 is either to buy it off the market, which helps support the price, right? Brings the price up, or you need to mint, right, in order to get the 8,000. And so sometimes people just swap for them, even though it would be better use of capital potentially just to do a stake because it's expensive already. But if you're messing around with $50, you might just buy and then not even bother worrying about the stakes. But I like the stake methodology better. So the 8,000 looks pretty good for an amplification opportunity, and that's where someone would stake out to day 8,000 using a Quattro Cinco. Right now, we're not quite there yet where you can just do a day, Quattro Cinco is 8,000, but we're getting close to that. So people, what they're doing is doing a Quattro Cinco. They don't get as many 8,000s when they mint, but they're minting the 8,000s and they're putting them into LP. And we can see that the LP for the 8,000, let's go to the pools, has come up moderately, 8,500. Remember, it was just $3,000 or $4,000 last week. So people are adding the LP in there. And the farms, yes, they're going to be great when they come out because they'll be farming rewards in the form of ACTR token. But there's also trading LP fees, right, in the meantime. So we have that going on. So yeah, so these are our pools. Now, for anybody who's ever wondering about this, all the pools for Actuator are not listed on the screen, right? And the reason for that is just space, right? It's very hard to get all the space. I mean, there's like 30 or 40 of the HTTs running around. And so, yeah, it's hard to get them all on the front. Get them all on the screen on the UI. I know they have some filtering here where you can pick, between featured HTTs, and you can see the featured ones which are on the farm. You could also come in and perhaps they're going to do some different this here. I don't know. They have a liquidity threshold where you can say only show me the ones with let's say 20,000. Let's see what happens when we do that. All right. So what's our lowest one? Our lowest one is 35. So let's say 40,000. I'm going to put 40,000 in here. And say done. And so now reduce the list here. So there's some filtering. I mean, if you have requests for that, you can send it in to the Actuator folks and they'll take a look at it. I'm sure maybe they'll do some things. I don't think it captures everything unless they've programmed it. Yeah. So there's a certain number of HTTs that are in the whitelisted set that show up here. Right? But we know there are other HTTs out there with additional LP, so we know that's the case. In terms of the vaults, let's go take a look at the vaults and see what they look like. So the 8,000s have been coming up. I mean, they're up at 20 million in 8,000s, and I don't know what'll happen exactly, but I mean, we did see the 7,000s up here at 128 million, so it's probably likely to head in that direction. And again, where does the Actuator come from for that? Well, people get paid Actuator in the farms. Some treat it as a reward token and they just sell it. Others treat it as a revenue token and they deposit it in the vaults. And when they put it in the vaults, they earn a piece of whatever the minting is for each of these HTTs. So there's a little bit of strategy about which HTT do you think is going to be the best out there. All right. Well, one of the big things we've been observing in the chat the last couple of days has been the front end of the curve being built out. So let's go take a look at that. Now you guys can get to this the same dashboard. It's a public dashboard through the bond market, Telegram. So this one's just top down 8,000 going all the way down based on some sort of amount of liquidity. So you can see the list of the HTTs here and some of the analysis about what pops out. And usually when I'm looking at the bond market overall, because I'm interested in this topic, right? I'm looking at things like, well, an 8,000 is 0.58 hex. Well, if I had one of those, I can get more Quattro 7s and move down the line. I can get more 7,000s. I can get more, I could actually stake Quattro Cinco and then rotate down the line and get HEX sooner, right? Or even though liquidity is thin right now on some of these, let's go to this one here. It's 3,000.78. So that's not one, because I feel like that's super cheap. That's not one I'd go after, but I'd look at, maybe I look at something like the 2970, which is on the front end of that curve. 0.91 gets me a double for 7,900. And so I could actually stake short out to 2970, not that short, but I mean out to 2970, and then swap upwards in the curve, and actually get different exposure at different levels. And this starts getting into how bond people might act, right? You might call that like a roll up, like a yield curve roll up, rolling up the curve, or an extension of duration, right? Those are the types of terms they throw around in TradFi. All right, so this is just the overall. Let me get to the lower upper bond. Let's do lower bond. All right, what we've seen here over the last week or so, I think I brought attention to it a couple of weeks ago. Back in May, even earlier, I think someone has been building out and starting to build out the front end of the curve. So we've been seeing that take place, and so this is really an infrastructure move. So monthly HTTs are now stretching from, what's the lowest one here, 2460 every 30 days up to day 3000. So 2460, 2490, 2520, 2550. And so the best that I can take back from this is that this is beginning to mimic treasuries and the treasuries market. Now it's very early, liquidity is low. We will see what we will see. And I did a video the other day just kind of talking about this idea of liquidity as a service, providing liquidity as a service. And so somebody can actually come in and say, instead of doing their native their native HEX stake for 30 days, we're about 30 days out for the 2460. They could go out to 2460. And now there's a little bit of liquidity. If they want to take a short-term swap, they can get 0.98 HEX for each of the HTTs, right? And then go do something with that HEX, come back and repay it, or don't repay it. They don't have to repay it, but they'll still earn everything they would have earned normally off of HEX going out to 2460. And so that would be the use case for somebody using it. The case for providing the LP as a service is very limited risk in that the 2460 is going to become HEX in about 30 days. And the other side is HEX. And so if somebody comes in, somebody would be worried and be like, well, what if somebody comes in, they drive the price down? Well, the only way they can drive the price down is by selling HTT 2460s. And they have to have them. That means they have to stake. And when they sell them, they're going to take slippage, a little bit of slippage down. That's why sizing is important. And when they take that little bit of slippage down, it goes into the pool. So the LP provider is whole because they have the HTT 2460s. Even if they're cheap on the market, doesn't matter. There's a terminal end date where they become 1-to-1. You just turn them back in and retire them or redeem them for HEX at the end. Right. So you have that ability. And so you can start to look at this, and I'll make this a little bit bigger so people can see it, but you can begin to see that V2 is interesting because the way it's so volatile, right? And, in a normal, in a very orderly market right now, the 2460 should be the highest. And then 2490 a little bit lower, and then next one up, 2520, a little lower, but it's higher. Why? Because LP situations, the way the LPs work, they do pull these around. Everything isn't always as perfect as we think it is. Like you're like, well, ARBs are going to ARB all the pools. Well, they don't always ARB all the pools. They ARB the one they find first, the one that they think they find. And there's some protocols maybe or bots out there or contracts, they don't see everything. anyways, what it ends up with is you have these kind of mispricings, right? Where the 2520 is higher than the 2460, or the 2850 is higher than the 2460. Like, why is that 1-to-1 with HEX? Right. So essentially somebody could come in, albeit this is low dollar value because it's only $600 worth of LP. They can come in and mint a 2850 and swap for near 1-to-1 HEX, because you know there'll be slippage and whatnot. And then they have their HEX back, but they also have a stake that's earning HEX. So yeah, lots of different strategies here. And I'm really interested. It took me a while to get my head around why this was set up, why somebody would be working on it. But if you can imagine much higher liquidity, you're essentially saying 30 days out, you can make a stake 30 days out, earn your HEX, and go do something with the liquidity almost 1-to-1. And that creates really interesting opportunities where, for instance, somebody might say, hey, I'll do that 30. I want the yield, and take a portion, because you don't have to do all of them either, by the way, right? You can do a portion of it. You have to mint them all, but you can mint a 2460 and then swap it all the way for a 3000, which is at a pretty steep discount, right? As we were talking about before, as far as what could be earned from that. So you have this whole curve, front end of the curve, being looked at. And so what would an LP provider probably do with this? Unless they, if they like this and they think it's going to work for them, when they come in and they set up LP, they'll set this LP up, and then they just wait, right? Wait until day 2460, remove whatever portion of the LP they want to remove. I mean, maybe some people leave some up, maybe they remove the whole thing. Anything's possible, right? But they would remove their LP, and now they have 2460s and HEX. And then they decide if they're going to retire the 2460s or just redeem them. But at 1-to-1, I'm not really sure, assuming it was really close to one HEX each, I'm not really sure which way would make the most sense depending on the situation. You might not even retire, because you already have the HEX. And then they end up, so one way or another, they find their way back all the way to HEX, and they could roll it out another 30 days, and you might see this liquidity roll up to 2490, right? And then so on and so forth, so that you have a rolling bow wave of liquidity at the front end, where if somebody wants you want to take short-term liquidity out, they can do that. And that's the service. That's the service part. If nobody uses the service, that's fine, right? Because then the person might not do it anymore, right? Maybe they'll look at this and go, I'm not going to do it anymore. But if people do utilize the service, they're earning fees in a number of different ways, which I covered in that video. And then they're like, God, this is pretty good. I like the little extra edge. And they move here, and then they move here, and they move here. Now you'll also see not all the HTTs are listed here, because not all of them have volume. The way I pull my data, you might see that. So like, for instance, 2580 should be here, but it's not there. And then 2580 plus 30 gets you to 2610. That's there. 2640, 2670, 2730, 2760, 2790. There should be a 2820, but it's not here yet. 2850, 2880, 2910, blah, blah, blah. So you can see that this is beginning to form up quite nicely. Now the question is, will the community participate in that? Will we see that? So we're beginning to see this kind of specialization. I also noticed that liquidity was set between 2460 and 2490, 2490 and 2520. So you have a horizontal kind of stabilization and path for that perceived roll up, where people could roll up, upwards. And so we're going to watch this pretty closely and see. I'm curious to see if other people will join in. Now, if somebody wants to do it, what you could do is you could just go test it for yourself, and do a small, something that's reasonable, that you're not worried about, and you go do a 2460, stake out the 2460, mint the 2460s. You could just hold them and wait I mean, you would be down the 1% fee for the minting. You just hold them and then redeem them, but kind of get the feel for how do you retire? How do you redeem? And that's a question that came up. Somebody was looking for a video that I'll try to put together on retiring HTTs. But get that feel for it. You might even come in and provide the LP as a service, knowing that right now it's early and there's not a lot of activity. But I mean, what happens if this liquidity was $10,000? Would there be somebody who wants to stake 30 days and pull out a few $1,000s? Maybe. And that's the service, right? So once we get to some sort of a level of liquidity, now the way the liquidity can grow on these types of pairs is not just by adding, though thicker is better, of course, for execution, but they could also be added through price appreciation. The liquidity goes up. I mean, a lot of the liquidity was higher a few days ago when we had higher prices in HEX, and so that's pretty good. That's pretty cool. And what's interesting about that is, like, when you think about people and the psychology of trading, they have values in mind that they're willing to move around. Like, let's say you're like $100 guy or lady, and you're only willing to move $100 at a time. Well, $100 into a $100 pool is hard, right? But $100 into a $10,000 pool is not hard. Very, very, very reasonable type of swap, right? And so even as you start going up the chain and these start to grow, we might see something really special develop here. And I haven't seen this anywhere else. So this is doing these types of LPs and all the rest. When people are doing that, they're building out the infrastructure, so it's not necessarily about the APR that they're going to get, the exact returns they're going to get. They're trying to help this system and sustain it. The same thing with that we're seeing with the LPXs. I mean, I can't look at the LPX without seeing a trade from HTTs or Actuator right now. I mean, it's just like over the top. All right, so the trade of the day, not financial advice, most discounted is that HTT 3000. And so if you were to swap into it and hold it until the redemption date, you could realize some pretty good gains in terms of HEX, right? And so not a lot of explosive price action or anything going on today. Again, HTT 3000 looks like the opportunity. HTT 6000 is leading and at a premium, and the 7900 is highlighted as a long-term return potential. Let's go look at that and put that on the screen one last time. I'll go over, see if we have any questions. I digress. Right, so 7900 is best total return, 6000 is best premium, best APR 3000. Boom, boom, boom. All right. A good 30 people watching. 30 people, 30 minutes. Say hello to everybody here. Hey, Tam, I saw you earlier, but thank you. Ruth, good to see you. HEX Bravestar. I love EHEX. We all love HEX. We all love HEX. That's right. Cindy Lou, good to see you as well. And DJ Cryptomatic, the HEX James Bond Desk. Doom, doom, doom. There we go. And then Glenn, good to see you as well. Let's just look at the old EHEX. Let's see how the EHEX has been doing. The screen up here. All right, so this is HEX. The HEX. This is the HEX. So you can see a really steady uptrend on the PX. All right, so it's been going up. Now let's compare that to the EHEX. Right. So the EHEX, not quite the same kind of shape here. So more kind of like a downward motion, overall trending down. But here's the thing, there's less participants. T-share rate is going up quicker. Payouts are going up quicker on EHEX. You might say this is sideways action and not down, though it did, like a kind of like a same low. Let's see if we can measure this out a little bit. So at this bottom here, bottom of the candle, came back and retested it, came down below it. So maybe it's more of a sideways action. Go follow maybe DJ or somebody else is doing like a lot of TA and kind of give you a better explanation. So I just kind of see this showing and the EHEX chilling out and just accumulation taking place. It's probably going to be a swing move, right, on PHEX. There'll be a time where there's rotation. There's some positives, right, because it is limited participation, closer to the source of money, all that kind of thing. There could be some wild changes and moves. On the other hand, the risk is people just continuing to use EHEX as a drainer to drain into PHEX at a minimum, maybe into other things, right? So there could be some wild swings. Access Alive has done a bunch of different things where he's talked on stream about the comparison to ETH Classic. That might be worthwhile to take a look at to see what the possibilities are with that. But hey, something totally different could happen. There could be somebody, you can never say never, right? And so if your initial response is EHEX, no, it's never going to go up. You got to ask yourself, why not? Why not? What if some big, I'd say, endowed person comes in and they decide they're going to drop $1 million into EHEX? You don't have to understand why they're going to do it. There would be a reason they did it, of course. But let's say they're going to come drop $1 million into EHEX over 30 days. What do you think is going to happen? Right? So the question is not can it happen, but will it happen? Who would do it? You can't know if you're not the person doing it, but clearly EHEX could go to the moon too. And because it is connected to PHEX, it's going to follow it to some extent. And then it's up to the holders to decide if they're going to buy, sell, whatever they're going to do, because they will affect the chart, right? Anyways, that's all I got to say. That's all I got to say about loving the EHEX. So yeah, I mean, a lot of us are participating in both. You have your stakes when you're out there. All right, Acid, you have to hit the replay. I'm just closing this out. So yeah, some good action, albeit not really exciting on the Actuator protocol. But there, again, that curve's being built out. And for those of you who are really curious, you're thinking about, well, I don't know what's going to happen, how this thing works. I don't know if I want to do this, or the other thing. Remember, you maintain your optionality by doing an HSI to start with, right? Because then you can do something if you choose to in the future. So number one argument for HSI versus native stakes, right? It's the same X contract. All the same things occur. So you have that. And then if you really are curious, try a $5 stake. Try it. Mint it, retire it, mint it, retire it, move it around, look at it, put it into LP, see what the LP feels like. There's plenty of information out there about how to do all this stuff. Their Actuator protocol is pretty good in terms of documentation as well. And shout out to that. The links are all in the show notes. You can go over and take a look at that. But this would be a great opportunity with the rollers. You do a 30 day and just get a feel for it. Make your own decisions based on your own experiences. With that, you stay crispy. I'm going to stay crispy. And we will see you next time. I'll see if I can put that stream together on retirement of HTTs for the future. And back at you.
Yo, T, urgent HEX buy signal. Charts flaming hot.
Golden ratio, huh? That's how legends stack T-shares.
Get them while they're crispy, folks. This window won't stay open long.
Stake smart. Win big. Time rewards those who act.
Stay crispy, Hexicans.
You gotta move it, move it. Feel the rhythm of the blockchain.